Hey, what's up? Wix here again, still carrying on with this STI build. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about clearancing the camshafts. Let's go. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're carrying on with this STI build, and today I'm going to talk about clearancing the camshafts. So if you followed the last episode, I had an issue with I had the wrong camshafts in there. Finally I have the right ones. So before we talk about the clearancing, let's just have a look at the new camshaft. Alright, so I've got most of the camshafts already in the engine, but I've pulled this one out just so we can have a quick look at it. So this is my left hand exhaust camshaft. This is a Brian Crower stage 3 cam. Still got the box over here. Doesn't really tell you much on there. That's the code I've used, and just in case anybody wants to know, BC0632. What I did have in there originally, which was the wrong one, was 23. That's for a EJ257 head, and I'm pretty sure, and it had the different triggers on the different, yeah, I'll call them triggers, for the triggers. So now I've got the right ones. So as far as I know, this is a stage 3 cam. I'll put up a picture of the specs, and it's the biggest one I can have while still running the single AVCS, which is why we selected this cam. But yeah, this is it. I guess it looks pretty much like any old camshaft. The lobes are quite high. Seems pretty aggressive, but I have seen more aggressive. But like I said, it's the biggest one I can get while still running AVCS. So if you remembered on the last camshaft for the intake, I had the wrong trigger part. This is what I needed, the ones with the paddles. And I also needed to know the number of the paddles, because when I go into the computer on the link, it'll ask how many paddles there are. So now these little 2-wire sensors that I have are the correct sensors for this type of camshaft. So I'm very happy that first of all I've got the right ones that I needed, and that they pretty much slipped in pretty well as well. So I've already clearanced everything, but I had to teach myself. I was asking a few questions from a few of the boys here and there, so I thought I'd just go over how to clearance these. Now when I'm saying clearance, first of all, for those of you who don't understand, when we're talking about clearancing, if we take a look at this one here, we're talking about the gap between the bucket, which are these things, the gap between the bucket and the bottom of the camshaft lobe. Now when we are doing this, we want the lobe pointing directly opposite the bucket, which will give us the lowest point on the lobe, if that makes sense. And that's where we measure. Now to know what clearance or what gap you should have, that's what the spec sheet is for. I'll just quickly show it again. So now I know that on the intakes for these particular camshafts, the intake clearance should be 0.008 inches. And if we're talking in mils, I think it says it 0.203 mils off the top of my head. So what we need to do now is, once we've got them in, we get out our feeler gauges, which looks like this. Trying to do this with one hand. No, let me sort that out. Alright, so if you don't know what feeler gauges are, this is what they look like. They're basically thin bits of metal, steel, I guess, but they're all measured to a precise measurement. And if I pull out this one here, see if we can see that. Hopefully you can see that this is a 0.008 feeler, and on this one particular one here it also tells you the mils, 0.20 mils. So on the spec sheet it's told me that this particular thickness here, that should fit in this gap quite snug. So what we'll do is we'll get our feeler gauge, and I should be able to slip that in pretty good, and also the other side. Now you might get resistance on sometimes, that's not too bad, just depending. That one I can feel it touching the bottom of the cam lobe, but it still slides under there. Another good way to check is if I go up to the next one, 0.09. Can we see that? Anyway, this is the 0.09, and mils wise it's 0.23 mils. So that one gets stuck in there, and it gets stuck in there. So that's telling me 0.09 is too much. So the perfect size, and what the spec sheet asked for, was 0.08. That slides in there and that slides in there. And pretty much that's how you clearance your camshafts. Now if it's too much or not enough, that's what I'll show you with this one here. I've pulled this camshaft off so I can show you how you sort out the correct size if it isn't the correct size. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll pull this bucket off here and show you the style of bucket and shim that I've got, because it's not your typical bucket, and I can't explain why, but I'll just show you what I've got anyway. So mine is just a bucket like that. It's got a little knob in the center, and then this is my shim here. And as I was mentioning before, when you don't have the right size, all you have to do is find the proper thickness. So these shims come in different thicknesses. Find the right thickness that'll give you the desired clearance that you need. I'll just give you a close-up of what my valves look like. So I've got the Supertech valves and springs. So it's got a little gap there that that the shim just fits in. So that sits in there, and then I simply just slide the bucket on top of it. Just like that. All good. So basically that's what you're doing when you're clearancing. The annoying part about this whole process, it's quite a long process, is that you can't check your clearance until you've got all the buckets and shims in, and you've got to tighten down the camshaft in here, and then you clearance it. If it's not right, you've got to undo all the clamps, all the caps again, take the camshaft off, pull the bucket out, change the shim, put it back in, put the bucket back in, camshaft back in, torque it down, check it again. Just got some roadworks out on the road being annoying today. So yeah, so that can take a few times. I'm guessing that people who do it all the time are pretty much guns at doing it, but this is my first time, so it took me a while. So what I'll do is I'll chuck this camshaft back in. We'll check the clearances on all 4 buckets. And then after that I might show you how you work out what size shim you actually need. So for now, I'll just chuck this camshaft back in. So just before I put the camshaft back in, the easiest way to get the buckets out is just using a little magnet. Just put it on and it'll pull the bucket out for you. In this case it also pulls out the shim which is inside there. Sometimes you can lose the shim, which happened to me yesterday. I dropped it down this hole here, that gap in here, and that gap is the return all the way to the oil sump. So I had to pull the oil sump off yesterday. I still haven't put it back on properly because that bucket fell into it. So I managed to get it out. I've just got a couple of bolts holding it at the moment. But I do need to pull that off and re-gunk it and put it back on properly. So yeah, just be careful. But like I said, the easiest way is just using the magnet. Even if it's stuck in there, I can just get a magnet and pull it out. But anyway, let's put this thing back together. Alright, so I've got it back in now, so now we'll just check that the spec for this bottom camshaft should be 0.010, which is this one here, or 0.25 mils. Alright, so I can just get that in there and just get it in there. So remember just to check it if it is the right one. If I go one up, which is 0.011, that one can get in and that one can't. So I know that one's perfect. They do say that a thousandth of an inch is okay. That one I kind of have to force in, so I'm going to say that one's okay. So those two are good. Now I need to rotate the camshaft so the lobes are facing out. I don't think it's going to let me turn it while it's like this, so I might have to loosen it a bit. Alright, so I've got the 0.011, 0.010 is what I'm after. Alright, so that one can just fit in as well, so that's good. I'm having a little trouble with that one. Okay, so they do say a thousandth either side is okay. Preferred to get it bang on, maybe slightly bigger, not slightly smaller. So I can get that 0.010 in there just with a little bit of persuasion, so that's pretty good. I'm going to say that's pretty good. So that's basically how you check the clearances on your camshaft. Slightly different from, I guess, a factory camshaft, yeah, I've only learnt this while having aftermarket Brian Crower camshafts, so that's about all I can speak on. The other thing I will mention is if you're ever taking the camshafts off, these buckets and shims are for that particular valve, I guess, or cylinder valve cylinder, or that lobe. You can't swap them over because it'll be all different sizes. So if you are taking your camshafts out and you need to take the buckets out for some reason, it's a good idea to write on them, and you can come up with your own system about how to mark it. I think I just went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 passenger side. That's the way I did it. Because now and then, if you haven't got the camshaft in and you're doing stuff, sometimes these buckets are a little bit slippery and they just fall out. If they all fall out, which did happen to me when I pulled them off I didn't know which ones they went in, so I pretty much had to start from scratch and recheck the whole lot. The specs on the older camshaft, or the other camshafts that I previously had in here, were exactly the same specs, but even though I had that, even the buckets that didn't fall out, they still weren't the correct clearance. So it does pay to check them. If you are getting new camshafts, new buckets, and you need to check the clearances, check every single one. Don't just assume, oh yep, should be same specs, this should be all good, because very rarely I've been told and found out, very rarely is it all good. So from here, the other good thing I'll say about these Brian Crower camshafts, I'm not sure if other makes do them, because this is pretty much my first turn at having aftermarket camshafts. On the end here, it does have an inscription of the code of the camshaft, BC0632, so they are inscribed on the ends of this one. The last camshafts I had previously before these, they were inscribed on the actual camshaft over here. So I would like to think the other brands do the same as well. So that's how to check to make sure you've got the right camshaft, without just looking at it and trying to guess. Okay, cool. So what I'll do now is I will talk about how to work out what size gear you've got. I'm wondering if I should pull out a bucket. What I might do is take this camshaft off again, just so I can show you guys. There's a mathematical way on working that out, and there's also just another, what do you call it, just a manual way of working out what size shim you need as well. So I might talk to you about the mathematical one, because that's helped me for most of the sizing, except for the last one. I had to do that manually. Yep, so what I might do is I'll pull the camshaft off again and pull the bucket out, pull the shim out, and show you what you need to do to work out what sort of gap it is, or what size shim you need, basically, to get the clearance you want. Alright, so yeah, let's do this again. I'm wondering, I might do it with this one here. I'll need to rotate the camshaft first. Oh no, I can take it off, because I already know that that's 0.10. So just before I take it off, if we're going to do it the mathematical way, there's three things we need to know. We need to know, with that bucket and that shim, what the current clearance is. So we know that because we checked that one just before, we know that's 0.010. So that's one measurement I need. The other two measurements I need is how thick is the bucket and how thick is the shim. So that's why I'll pull them off. We'll pull out the verniers, give them a measure, and then I'll show you on the whiteboard how to work it all out. Okay, so I decided to pull this one out because that one I was having troubles with my calculation, doing the mathematical way. So I had to do that manually, but I'll try it on this one. Hopefully it'll all just work out. We also know that the clearance on that one was 0.010, which is what it was meant to be anyway. Okay, so one measurement we've got is what the clearance was, 0.010, or that's in mils, that's 0.254 mils. I'm not sure how many decimal places you're meant to go to, but 2 or 3 I think at least. We also need to know the thickness of this bucket. So the thickness from here to the inside of that little knob inside, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's kind of raised, so we need to measure the inside of that. And we also need to know the thickness of our shim. So if I get some verniers, zero them off. So far that's 1.93. So that's that one. And then we need to figure out a way on how to use these verniers to measure to the inside of that knob, which is real hard to do. But what I kind of did was I've got a little Torx socket here and my handy dandy tape, and what I've been doing is, I'm not sure if other people do this, but it works. So I'm just going to take this to one of the arms of the verniers. Doesn't need to be flash, it just needs to hit the other arm like that. It's the same thing, when I hit it, I'll zero it off. And now I've got another set of verniers, and that will allow me to go inside my bucket and hit that little knob piece right in the middle. And that tells me it's 2.85. Just do that again, zero it off. Yep. So that bucket thickness is 2.85, and I could do it with this one here. .85 and 1.94. 2.85. Just going to write that on the board so I don't forget. Alright, so if we come over to the board, 2.8, so everything's in mils so far. This is the bucket and the shim. So I think factory Subaru ones, the bucket and the shim's all in one piece, so usually it's around 4 point something mils. Okay, and we also know the current clearance. Current clearance was 0.10. Now that's inches, but in mils that's 2.54 mils. So those are the, we'll put that one in brackets so we can keep everything in mils. So that's 1, 2, 3. Those are our three measurements that we need: bucket size, shim, or if your bucket and shim's together, well, that's 1. And then what is your current clearance? Now I'm just thinking this might be hard to do because it's already at the proper clearance, but we'll go through the motions anyway. So what we need to do is I need to add these two together. Now I'm going to practice my maths in front of you. 5 and 4 is 9. 8 and 9 is 17. And 3, 4. So the total of those two is 4.79. What I need to do is also add in the current clearance, which is 0.254. And that will give me 4, 4, 0. That'll give me that number there. So what we're trying to figure out is from the valve, which has got a little indent in it, from this point here hopefully we can see that. So if this is the valve, in here is where the shim sits. We want to measure from here all the way up to the bottom of the cam lobe, to this point here. And so how we do it is we say, well, in between there's a bucket, there's a shim, and then there's a gap, and that's all the way up to the bottom of that. So the distance from there to there is 5.044 mils. Okay, so that's what it actually is. This shim could be any size. It could be 1.98, 1.75, whatever. But if that changes, it'll give us a different clearance. So the first thing we do is we just, this is in the case that you've dropped all the buckets out and the shims are gone all over the place. Need to start from scratch. Just put the bucket and shim in. It'll be what it'll be. Measure them. Also get the clearance at what it was, and that's what we use in our equation. So hopefully this is perfect. It should come out pretty perfect as well. Once we get this number here, what it actually is, so I'm going to just call this actual. Now we need to determine what's the desired shim size, because that's the only thing we can change. We're not going to change the buckets, but it's real easy to change the shims. And the clearance is what we're trying to gain from changing the sim. So what we need to do with that is, it's real easy. We just subtract the desired clearance, which is minus, now my thing wants to run out. So I minus, I'm going to write over here, desired clearance, which we already know is 2.54. And in this case it's going to give us that number again because we just added it, 4.79. All good. So 4.79. So this number here is total of bucket and shim. But we're not changing the bucket, we just want to work out the shim is, what size shim we need. So it's real easy. All we're minusing off this number is the size of the bucket, which is 2.85 minus 2.85. And if I do that, 9 minus 5 is 4. So I'll steal a 10, 7, 1, 9. And it'll be 3 minus 2 is 194. And I'll put shim size needed. Hopefully you can see that. I might use a different color. .94. Okay, which is pretty much what we've got, so that's why it worked out. And that's basically it. So like I said, if you've got separate buckets and shims, you need 3 numbers. You need the size of the bucket, size of the shim, and what your actual clearance is using that combination. So like I said, this shim, even the bucket could be whatever it is. What you're doing is you're just measuring what is actual bucket size, shim size, and with those two there, what clearance did you get? So you can work it out in inches. I've converted mine to mils to keep everything in mils. Okay, first step is we add all these 3 together. So bucket and shim is 4.79 plus my clearance came to this number here. This is my actual clearance from, remember, the valve seat, or where the shim sits in, right up to the bottom of the lobe. once we've got our actual number, we subtract what our desired clearance is, which we know that's on the spec sheet. It told us this is the measurement here that we're trying to achieve, and that's 0.25 mils. Subtract that, it'll give us the total of the bucket and shim, but we just want the shim, so we just subtract the size of the bucket, which is 2.85, and that gives us our final number. This is the shim size that is needed to get the desired clearance. Now that's the mathematical way, and like I said, for 90% of this it worked until I got to this last one, and it told me I needed 2 mils, 2.067 I think it was, sorry, 2.07. So I managed to find one that was 2.06, and it was too big. So I tried to grind some out yesterday, and I was just taking way too much off. What I ended up doing was just getting some 800 wet and dry sandpaper and just rubbing the shim on it with a bit of water. Took me about 4 goes to get it down, but I got it down to 2 mils exactly, and that gave me my proper clearance of 0.010. So I had worked out, I had done the mathematical equation maybe about 5 times, and it was still giving me a headache. So the manual way worked better, and the other way to do it is you can buy big kits of shims, and then the other way is just swapping the shims with the numbers that you think might go in there and just manually doing it. The only long outcome from that is that you've got to keep putting the camshaft in, taking it off, putting it in, taking it off, putting it in, taking it off. So in a way, the mathematical way is faster because it'll give you a more direct idea on exactly what size you need. But mathematical is mathematical. That depends if everything's dead flat square, which it's not always like that, which is probably what was happening on this case. So sometimes just trying different ones is the best way, having to sand it down like I did to get the right result. Doesn't really matter which way you do it. What matters is that when these camshafts are in, everything's clearanced properly. So I'm happy with that. So what I'll do now is I will put this shim and bucket back in, camshaft back on. I'll just check the clearance one more time, and then that's the clearancing all done. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that now. I've checked these clearances about 1 million times, I think, because it's probably a real crucial part about putting camshafts in. So you do need to make sure that you're on the money with this stuff. Like I said, it's been said that you can have 1/1000th each side of the required or desired clearance according to the spec sheet. I think after everybody I've talked to, it's better to have more higher instead of lower, but yeah, I think if you're worried about that sort of stuff, it's best to talk to your local mechanic or whoever you go to that builds engines and just get their opinion on it. But basically what I've shown you is the process of how to clearance your new camshafts, making sure that your buckets and shims are all the right size. Yeah, I think that's it for this episode. So next up, I think I'm ready for Selwyn to come around. Selwyn's going to come around and dial the cams in. Now I'm new to that. I don't understand that. I don't know how it works, why you have to do it. But hopefully we'll learn that in the next episode. So that'll be in the next episode. So if you're keen to continue to support me, we're still going, but we're nearly there. Hopefully once Selwyn dials those in, I can shut the whole engine back up again, and then it's just a matter of putting them back in the car, and I should be able to turn the key as well. Hopefully with these correct camshafts that I've got now, the sensors will just work, everything will just work. I couldn't be bothered putting the other sensors, which is the, forgotten the name of them, but it's the 3-wire sensor, Hall effect, I think it's called, Hall effect type sensor. I couldn't be bothered wiring in the extra 12-volt wire I think you needed. I just wanted to run with what I got, because as you know, I've had a horrible nightmare with wiring. So I decided to get the more aggressive cam as well. And I just wanted what I wanted, so finally happy those are in, clearanced. Next episode is dialing the cams in. So that's it for now. Please like and share this video, and if you've got any questions about clearancing, I'll try and answer them as best as I can. This is only clearancing for Subaru. I think on other engines is slightly different. But yeah, that's it for now. See you in the next one. Ciao.